Welcome to Talent Bus, where I talk with SaaS companies on how they are doing their talent acquisition. In today's episode, we have interesting topic when Johanna is joining from Haiilo. Haiilo is quite new SaaS company, but they have already a lot of products, a lot of people, because they combined 3 SaaS companies into one. A company called Smarp, COYO, and Jubiwee combined to be one company with totally a new brand. Today we are talking about how creating a completely new brand has changed their way of doing recruitment and employer branding. We talk about how to combine 3 different processes, how to combine 3 different technologies into one place. Let's start off from how building completely new brand has changed their way of doing recruitment and employer branding. And is it harder to recruit people now when potential employees haven't heard of the brand before?
Yeah, well, essentially, like you mentioned, it is a bit of a challenge having a completely new name. We came out with the name Haiilo only about 6 months ago, so we haven't even had that much time to build out the new name. And definitely, like you mentioned, going out to talking to candidates on LinkedIn, they might not know what Haiilo is, and they usually might know the old companies and those names. You need to explain a lot. Okay, so Haiilo is this is what has happened. So it definitely takes a lot of additional time out of the talent acquisition team. And obviously it is not as easy as it was with the old names, who we've essentially, all of them had been built out many years and kind of established a good name. So now with Haiilo, we kind of had to start from the beginning and think about how do we establish a name as a company. It's on the talent acquisition and kind of talent side. It's kind of the same as what on the sales side as well. When you sell to companies, they might not know the new name, they know the old ones. So it's kind of the same process and just building out that name. But definitely we've been aiming to be as active as possible on social media, doing these posts, and also I think it connects quite a lot to how we define what do we want to be as a new company. So a lot of that kind of thinking has been going into it, and now it's been 6 months. We've seen some kind of progress, so to say, but it's still a big challenge that we need to tackle.
Yeah, and I would say building a brand always takes a lot of time. But then I think, in the other hand, for example, if we think about, let's take Smarp as kind of one of the companies that kind of combined into Haiilo right now. Smarp had a kind of good, well-known brand, but then at the same time, kind of if you want to change your brand, it is also a long process, like going from a brand that is known for something and you want to be known for some other thing, actually. So have you noticed that there has been kind of some good things in creating this new brand, so you can kind of start from I would say fresh table and kind of really, for example, in your employer branding, talk about the things that you think that are the most valuable for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's also a good point. It does allow kind of this clean table, so to say, to just define once again, like, just kind of not completely forget about the old, but essentially have like a clean slate. What do we want to be as a company? How do we want to go out? What type of perception and brand do we want to have as a company? So yeah, definitely that has also its advantages.
Yeah. How about now? Now there was kind of 3 companies, and now there's one, and all the companies have their kind of own processes in recruitment. Of course, I would say for most companies, the recruitment process look somewhat similar. There is some kind of intro call, some other course, validation, maybe some kind of task phase, job offer. So they are typically quite similar, but still I can imagine that there has been a lot of work kind of integrating these three processes into one. So can you share a bit more on that one, and kind of did you decide to integrate these into one process, or do you still have kind of few different processes running right now?
Yeah, well, actually, that was one of the, if I talk about my kind of function, the people and talent acquisition function, combining the talent acquisition side was one of the first things that we actually did, which was mostly because a lot of the team came out of the kind of, how would I say it, ex-COYO side. So that kind of launched it to be in a way that it was quite easy to align the processes at the end of the day. And like you said, it's not like we had a lot of the same steps and same type of things in the processes anyway. So I think kind of like one of the biggest things that we had to do was to establish this global process completely, because what COYO is kind of the German-based company, and they didn't have international offices, whereas we on the Smarp side, we had UK and US. So essentially, kind of combining all of these different locations into one, and also kind of going about it in a way that, you know, the talent acquisition is completely different in the US and UK than what it is, as an example, in Finland. So kind of defining that process. Do we have the exact same process, global Haiilo talent acquisition process in all of the locations? Do we modify it a bit? What we essentially did was that we have the kind of principles in place. So we have kind of this 4 to 5 stages, which is always the same, but obviously it can be modified based on the fact that, you know, in the UK, they tend to be quite agency focused when it comes to talent acquisition. So then taking those agencies involved and then maybe adding, eliminating some stages. But all in all, that was actually one of the kind of first things that we managed to align and get all into one.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. How about the kind of your talent acquisition team structure? So I noticed that kind of if there are kind of a lot of people coming, three different teams coming into one team, there might have been kind of leaders for all of these teams, and then you cannot have a team with like three leaders maybe. Like how did you like assemble the team and the kind of team structure within the talent acquisition?
Yeah, so what we essentially had was that um, we had talent acquisition team in the German-based company, so the COYO, and then we had one talent acquisition specialist in Helsinki. So we essentially combined that team into one, and then one of the out of the talent acquisition team became the team lead. So that was also just kind of combining the teams into one.
Yeah, yeah. You are yourself a SaaS company offering a tool for companies, but then I can imagine that you had many tools that you were using kind of within your talent acquisition, within your people function. Can you share a bit more, like how did you go about that one, like figuring out like, hey, here are the different tools that we are using, a lot of data scattered in different places, and then you should kind of bring that one into one place. Like how does that look like as a project?
I think the tool was kind of that was one of the most painful ones in the sense, because what you just mentioned, the data, the kind of getting all of the data into the new tool, into one tool. Which tool do we go with? So, and I think on the kind of talent acquisition side, once again, it was quite simple. We just switched. It doesn't have that much data, so we switched into what COYO had been using. So it was Personio, and they also have the people kind of function. So it's also talent acquisition and the HR management tool. And we looked into many options when it was about the kind of HR management, so vacation days, sick days, the kind of people management. And we aim to look at a tool which could do all of that in one same and all of the locations. Now, that's not quite possible. I don't like if anybody knows a tool which can do, Finland, UK, US, Germany, France, please do tell me. But I think the US was one of the biggest challenges in the sense that you can have the kind of people functions, so the vacation days and all of these kind of somewhat set up, but when it comes to then the benefits and payroll, it's not possible because of all of the kind of taxes and those implications. So what we then essentially still have in place is that we have different tools in different locations, but what is same is the people management. So all of the data out of the people, how do the employees put in the vacation days and sick days? How do they find all of the documents that they need? That's all in the same place. And that was, yes, quite painful to get all the data into the same place and same one tool.
Yeah. I think there is the kind of course, a part of the technology and data, but then there is always the people using the tools. Would you say that was hard to kind of, maybe not from the talent acquisition team point of view, but from kind of everyone working for these companies, and then you bring in kind of, for example, new tools where you need to put in information? Like, was that hard?
I don't think using the tool itself is difficult. It's quite simple, but getting adjusted to using the new tool, getting adjusted to getting people to use the tool in the way that it's supposed to be used, putting, all of the info and what they need into it. How do they find the info so they don't always go to the old tool? So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge. It takes time, but I think it's not too difficult at the end of the day. It's just you need to communicate quite a lot with the people, and show them how it's done, and just be patient, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the kind of biggest challenges that companies are having when they are either kind of doing a merger like this, or when kind of other companies buying another company, is kind of fitting cultures together. And I think one of the biggest risks is that like people will leave the company when there is something like this happening. So can you share a bit more kind of how did you plan on kind of combining these cultures, and kind of how did that went? What has been the challenges on that one?
Yeah. Well, okay, I need to go back like 12 months ago when this all kind of began. So obviously that was one of the main focuses of not just the people function and the team, but also the management team, on what kind of company do we build, what kind of values do we believe in, what is the kind of identity of the new company as Haiilo. So what we essentially did, and maybe going back a bit, is that obviously all of these three companies had a lot of the same type of mentality, values as well. So what we noticed from the beginning is that even though we might have as companies differences, still the kind of mentality and the people had the same kind of vibe and the feeling. So it was essentially then just combining those into one, and also aiming to take something, a little bits and pieces out of all of the different previous companies, but then actually making something new. So we didn't want any of the kind of things that we had to be just out of that one company and none out of the rest. So it was essentially combining those values, the identity, into one, but then also thinking what we want to be as a company. We had like workshops to define as a management team, kind of what values do we want. We then defined those. We also, I believe, had kind of these focus sessions with selected people and employees to see how they feel about the values that we had looked at with the management team, and then also getting that feedback from the employees. How do they identify with these values? Do we need to make some changes? And then based on that, we launched completely new values. And obviously then implementing those takes a bit of time. So we had a few kind of initiatives also, like mentioning them quite often, giving feedback with values. So we have this feedback Friday in which you can kind of post and give feedback to colleagues by connecting something that they have done to the values that we have. So those types of initiatives then kind of launch the values and the identity. But it's definitely something that you need to focus a lot. And one of the biggest challenges that we had as a company was that we did all of this with COVID, so we didn't have the chance to get people to be in the same place face to face. We only had that chance now in June, which was just amazing. I think that was kind of the final step into actually unifying the whole team globally when we had all of the 250 employees in the same place, having fun and meeting and just interacting. So it was a bit of a pity that we didn't have the chance to do that, 12 months ago, but luckily we did. And obviously now, because the travel has eased up a bit, so we can actually now have also teams meeting up, and that actually helps out a lot in building that one team, one identity, feeling united, so to say, as a company and as a team.
Yeah, sounds very good, very good. And I really love the idea on sharing feedback kind of based on the values, because I think it's super important to get those ones out there. But one thing that I've kind of studied lately a bit is decision making. It's not completely new topic for me, but kind of as a business owner, I feel like I'm doing more and more decisions daily, and I like an idea making decisions based on your values. And if you find yourself in a situation like, hey, I'm not sure what I should be doing here, like then kind of I open up our values, read them, and think like, hey, which decision would goes towards our values? So
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. And actually, one of the questions that we have on the kind of engagement tool is how do you see that the team's actions connect to the company's values? How do you see that the actions and the decisions made connect with the values? So I think that's also something that is good to emphasize, and also see how the employees actually feel about it, and do they actually feel that the values that the company has have been followed up on, so to say.
Yeah. Can you share a bit more on kind of the engagement tool, and did you kind of set up some clear, for example, goals for this one? And hey, like here are the things that we want to measure, and here are the levels we want to be, let's say, in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we obviously look at engagement as a whole, so that includes a lot of different questions when it comes to kind of health, wellness, communication, connection to the team, and then obviously we look at ENPS, and we do set some goals with that, but obviously in times of change, it also tends to kind of be something that it's impossible to see how the situation will develop. But definitely we did set some KPIs in the beginning on how we wanted to develop, and essentially how we look into engagement. And that has been one of the biggest things that we've definitely been focusing on, is trying to keep the engagement as high as possible. Obviously, when you do something like this, and when you have a lot of changes in the company, it does have an impact on the employees as well. So definitely keeping an eye on the engagement metrics has been something that we have been doing quite heavily.
Yeah. Can you share a bit on kind of founding yourself in a situation where you suddenly have 3 CEOs and 2 CMOs and 5 head of sales or whatsoever. Like a lot of overlapping talents. Like how to navigate through that one.
Yeah, that's a big challenge, definitely. So obviously it's kind of about finding a place for each employee and each kind of leader and talent that we have in the company. So you just have to find, and also as a global company, you have a lot of opportunities. So obviously it's about how do we align the teams, what makes most sense, who would be the best in what type of a position, and then just kind of making decisions based on that. So looking at the kind of skill set and the kind of strengths of each individual, and then aiming to also look into how do we combine the teams, how do we unite them, do we still keep some separate teams and functions. Yeah, that's maybe kind of how to go about it.
Yeah. And kind of this kind of project combining kind of multiple companies into one, it's always a big project, but maybe to get a little bit better understanding, like how big project it is. Like if you should say from scale 1 to 10, like 1 being that you are still kind of 3 different companies under one brand, and 10 being that, hey, we really are one single company with kind of one way of doing things, one brand, and all that. Like, where would you say that you are on that journey right now?
I think we've gotten close to the 10, I would say. So maybe something like a 9. Obviously, what helped out a lot was when we had this big company event in June, in which all of the employees came to one and kind of got to meet up. Obviously, you will always, especially with the people who've been with the different companies a long time, it takes time to change that mindset and change the kind of mentality. But as a company, yes, I think we've unified. We have global teams. We don't have like kind of separate teams, but one global team in each function. But definitely still some kind of old processes and all of these, which with us is also a lot based on location, and that's not maybe so much of the old company X, old company this, but it's mostly about the location specific needs and the way that the market is going. So as an example, sales, we have a DACH-based sales team, we have a US-based sales team, and those still tend to be a bit focused on what they were with the previous companies, but slowly also those will be integrating as well.
Yeah. And kind of doing this kind of project, I can imagine that there has been some fuck ups, a lot of learnings, and all that. But kind of if you would start this project all over again, like what would be one thing that you would do differently, and what would be one thing that you felt like, hey, we really succeed in this one, like I would do it exactly the same way?
Well, definitely what I would do again is think about the communication. So I think communication plays a key kind of part in these types of situations. So I would still kind of, even though we thought and I think we did communicate a lot, and obviously with the tools that we have as a company, we have the best setup to do so, but it's still, a lot of kind of you just need to communicate a lot, and maybe even to the point of over communicating, so that the message comes across to all of the employees, because people also tend to forget, they tend to make assumptions. So I would say just, communicate as much as possible, because in a situation like this, people want to know what's happening. They want to know when things will happen. And I think we could have still done a bit better with that. And also, I think one of the things that I hope would have been different was the COVID. So like I mentioned, we didn't have the chance to have all of the teams in the same place meeting up. So I think that would have kind of made things a bit, I think that kind of unifying people and the teams would have been faster if they had met face to face. And now, especially kind of post-COVID times, even though you can do a lot of things online and completely, remote and all that, is not the same as meeting someone face to face and spending time, in the evening having fun. So that's one thing that I hope would have been different. Obviously, it was something that we couldn't control in any way. What I then think we did quite well is maybe kind of I think what we managed to do well is, and what I'm happy with is the values that we created with Haiilo. So all of these new values and how we implemented those and made those into kind of this big part of the identity as a company.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you got a lot of good ideas about SaaS talent acquisition. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to share it on your social so others can hear it too. And if you have a topic in mind that you would like me to cover in this podcast, share it with me as well. I'm Samuli, CEO and co-founder in Suddently, where we help fast-growing SaaS companies in their talent acquisition. Make sure to follow us, make sure to follow this podcast, and have an awesome week. Bye-bye.